Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to the fall. We're speed running through the game a second time to look at the developer's commentary. We kind of know what we're doing this time, so this should be much quicker.
Oh, good. Our refurbished droid is here. You will serve my family and I.
That being
Understood?
said,
Good. The home is a mess since throwing out our
I'm
old
not
droid.
really
You
loving
need
what
to
the
clean
developers
upstairs
are
and make
saying.
this
They're not
room
giving
feel
me
beautiful.
an insight that I can agree with. They're giving me their insights, and it's just leading me to feel like they are just on a completely different page than I would be at. This little box is a little too small for this kind of game, for an object to be hidden there. I would also say the horror elements here that it feels like, where you would just go through the motions of killing fake cardboard people or solving this by cheating, just doesn't have a horrific impact if it was supposed to. I could definitely see a different version of this game where you had puzzles and you had to kill a real baby in some kind of bloody way to get to pass a test, and that would be very gory and probably get some controversy around it.
Entering the house to meet your new owners, we meet the Wooden family. And originally, we didn't really have a plan for how they would be voiced. We were considering a much larger cast of voice actors.
And then we found
Abigail Spracklin, who is so versatile. We got her to test a number of the voices, and they were fantastic, really diverse.
and also very condescending too, which is very important.
The characters, not the actress.
Right, of course. Yeah. I think it was really important that the domestic tests felt incredibly dehumanizing. There was something interesting about setting an AI through this course that paralleled some of the rights issues that women went through in the 50s.
I think for most of our game's audience, there's a relationship to that time period where we look at it and we go, what the hell is going on? And in its own continuity, there's also this sort of father knows best feeling where it justifies itself in its own atmosphere, participating in the oppression to continue the oppression, which domestication really, really captures.
And also, other than that, I think it's just a really weird idea. You know, sending this robot through this domestication course is just bizarre. Whenever you make a game, obviously some ideas are more compelling than others, but one of the things that I'm really interested in moving forward especially is that anything that we make, I want it to have that really evocative element where it's just like, oh wow, what a weird idea. In all of the fall, this is the area that I'm most proud of in that sense.
I love that we have ARID, who's just coming up to this area, and in her conversation below talking with the mainframe, she's like, hey, I'm a badass military machine. I don't have to follow these rules. And then she gets into this place, which is so beneath her, but she doesn't have the capacities to interact with it. Like, what a knockdown.
Yeah, it's humbling.
So, yeah.
Keeping a home clean will be one of your primary functions. Clean this room. Any detected dust or...
I have
Let's
completed the task.
solve all these without asking for a hint. I think you've got to solve this one
detected.
first.
I can breathe.
Validated.
See, I don't think we actually need the plastic bag again, but yeah, we'll leave it. And I'll leave the developer commentary for the baby when we get closer to doing the baby puzzle all the way through. Inherently, if they wanted to tell a story about women being domesticated, then they probably should have just told a story about women being forced to domesticate. It would have been a weird avant-garde story, certainly, if it was set in a future world, but like, be a little bit more on the nose if that's your theme, because that theme didn't even cross my mind at all in playing this game, that it had anything to do with a potential first wave feminism or feminism at all. And I don't want to get into a big anti-SJW rant, but this is probably the worst way to be a social justice warrior and push feminism if your message is just muddled and incomprehensible to the player. Yeah, I will agree that the idea of having a testing course for robots that you would just program to make sure they act correctly is weird.
One of the major goals
and
in
silly.
Art for the Fall was, of course, to have it feel very rough and kind of broken down. But also, the GUI went through several iterations as well. You know, I originally had clean health sliders and stuff like that for ARID. But ultimately, I was really inspired by a simple scene in the Alien movie, the original one made in, like, I think it's 79, where the computer boots up at the beginning and it wakes everybody up out of hypersleep, and it's this it's this old crappy DOS computer, which of course is insane that there'd be a computer that old on a spaceship, but is, you know, was made in the 70s. That was the best they had.
Robot.
It has
Make it
this
delicious.
great practical gritty feeling. I really wanted the whole world to be shot through with that.
Yeah, there's
I
a
will
feeling
return.
in DOS
Yeah.
where technology was this area of hope as well.
Right.
And then when we look on it retrospectively, it looks incredibly archaic. But there was this sense of the time of, whoa, we're advanced. So to take that area of hope and then set it into a position of decay, I think is awesome.
Yeah, there's another point of just kind of pointless interaction. And see, that was the thing that really messed me up, was that I didn't see that glass. And because I didn't see that glass, wasn't able to find the gold or the goo. And we missed a commentary on the elevator, but we'll try to get it later. There's a commentary in the middle of the screen there.
I think that Caleb and I are both really interested in dark humor, but I think that it works pretty well with The Fall in this case, because if we didn't have something to lighten the mood, I think the game would probably be a little bit too serious and heavy and be actually ultimately pretty cumbersome, wouldn't it?
Yeah, dark humor allows us to play with themes that maybe are a little too grotesque if you address them seriously.
Right.
Killing a baby and making it so absurd in one sense that we can point to something
It's a little
else,
surprising there
Russia
isn't
and the
subtitles.
war, whatever themes we may or may not be interested in.
Yeah. And it's also a lot of fun to kill babies.
Yeah, I laughed.
Yeah, I think these guys really were high when they created this game. Like, that's all I
never
get from
saw
it.
a lot of feedback about the crosses.
I thought that we'd get somebody.
We were
but-
so concerned about it.
Well, yeah, the story goes that in the early version, actually, the caretaker, basically, there was some backstory where he had a Christian owner, and some of the dogma that he'd been given went a little bit crazy inside his little robot brain. There's a lot more kind of overt parallels between rigidity and dogma. And actually, that's one of the first things that Caleb kiboshed when he came on board, because admittedly, it's pretty heavy-handed.
It almost feels like
when
there's
I
two
came on,
Calebs.
it didn't feel like it was an agenda for you. It was more about wanting to explore rigidity and the things that Christianity symbolized for a lot of Western civilization in terms of our evolution socially. You know, it's been a part of our development, but we're not all necessarily going to church on Sunday. You wanted to use those things to evoke certain things.
Right. We took out a lot of that stuff, but I think that the symbol still kind of belongs in the world. It still feels right.
On one hand, it represents for people a type of oppression, but in the same hand, it's a type of sacrifice.
That's right.
And there's an interplay in that space, which is where we want it to be.
Yeah, I didn't really get any of that. I get the idea of crosses just being like horrific imagery, but if the idea was that they were going to imply that being a robot was much like being a Christian, and that all Christians are just following this rigid set of rules that you can just find loopholes around. You would have had to have gone a lot deeper down that path. And you can certainly do that. The Binding of Isaac certainly has a lot of people who would never play that game, but it covers a lot of that same imagery and that same idea, and it goes way deeper than this game does, than as far as showing across. Basically what they're doing is they're doing a heavy metal cover album by putting a cross there and just having no meaning behind it.
I think that Caleb and I are both really interested in dark humor.
Like, as far as the dark humor, it's somewhat problematic, but not horrifically problematic in this game.
Activated. Hey.
I am completing the
Groovy. Efficiently.
Perhaps your vocal.
Thank you for the I've spent the better part of these last 30 years perfecting my authentic human sound, where I can.
Let's
I
just
must return.
One thing, why do you think you're here?
Irrelevant. My
just disengage and not even talk to him. Yeah, if you're gonna have dark humor, then you can't really have a serious story, and they're trying to have a serious story here. It's tonally inconsistent, certainly, as far as, is this supposed to be a spooky horror game where the robot really is in some level of danger and is trying to escape to save its pilot's life, or is this supposed to be a dark humor comedy game, much more like a point and click adventure game might have, where it's just a joke, Monkey Island type game, because you really can't have both. And if they were good at seeking their goal of focusing on domestication and all of that, I don't feel like the dark humor works well in that way, because that should have been done more seriously. Like, if the idea was you play as a robot, but then it's revealed at the end you never were a robot, and that you kill a baby by smothering it, for instance, as the robot, and then it flashed back and showed, oh no, actually that was a human, and that was a human baby, and you actually did smother it, and you failed as a mother, and you failed as a human being by killing the baby, then yeah, that would be a very dark twist, and not humorous at all, really. There'd be no comedy in that. It would only be tragedy. Yeah, I guess inherently you have comedy and you have tragedy, and you can have a little bit of both in your story, but this one tries to be a little too balanced for my taste.
There's a lot of violence in the way ARID solves these tests, isn't there?
There is. She's out of control.
Out of control.
No, I'm kidding. Well, yes, she is, I suppose. That's
drinking.
the point. She is getting out of control. But I think that you have utilized violence in its relationship to oppression.
Oh, well, right. Oh, well, yeah. Yeah, well, I think there's something really interesting about the feeling of being oppressed. It's almost passive-aggressive in a way. It's like, okay, I'm going to solve these tests, but I'm going to rip this old lady's legs off and grind up this baby and feed this kid this head and all this kind of stuff. It seems to fit in like a cathartic kind of way.
Whenever there's a movement of countering oppression, very, very often, I mean, you get your Gandhis out there, but most of the time there is some violence in that motion. Right. You know, there's the metaphor of you got to bend the hockey stick back the other way to get it straight.
Yeah, it seems like the main character, not Caleb. Let's try to beat this game without reading any logs too, just to see if there's some achievement around that. It really doesn't seem like he cares one bit about this game, or at least the story of this game. And then Caleb is coming back and trying to pretend like they care.
The inventory went through a few iterations. Actually, interaction in general went through a lot of iterations. I think originally there was a few more options. There was like network, talk to, hiccup, and use, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and they're completely superfluous. Most of that stuff can just be handled with interact. That was optimized, and so was the inventory as well. But I'm happy with the way the inventory turned out. Do we hate it for any reason?
No.
I kind of do. There's like nothing that the X button does, where it definitely could have toggled instead of the right stick, just in case some people don't want to click the right stick to switch between laser sight and spotlight. There's nothing on the D-pad, so if you wanted to have D-pad controls to aim up, left, and down, that's just an option that's not there. Or if you wanted to move left and right with the D-pad, that option is missing. We get pop-ups for everything to network with, and there's just no reason for that. You have a cancel icon for no reason, when it really should just be A to interact and then B to disinteract with. And when you interact, you pop up different items you could potentially work with. Like, I definitely see problems here. But they don't see problems. They see pure gold in a half-finished cliffhanger game.
So ARID has 3 rules, and clearly we're interacting with those rules throughout the game. But we wanted to build a universe where there was an understanding that AIs, complicated AIs particularly, are developed with 3 rules. So in writing both the caretaker and the mainframe as well, I started with what their 3 rule sets would be, that they would have been designed with based on the intention that their human developers would have had for them. And then, like with ARID, those 3 rules, I played with how they might have decayed over time, and that created the personality for these guys.
There's no reason why it would be limited to 3 rules, and almost certainly if you had an AI would be programmed with way more than 3 rules. And if you're going to go with 3 rules, then you're going to inevitably be making a comparison to Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics as a sci-fi concept, not really a concept that works with AI programming. So why not mention that in the game and just make the direct reference? Even if you said at the bottom of the operating system that these rules were roughly based off of the laws of robotic modified for use by the for the AR7 because the Isaac Asimov rules.
We'd like to thank 3 very special Kickstarter backers for lending their faces to this video. Nick, Richard, and
would
Cheryl.
not work.
Thank you guys so much. Also, thanks to
Because
my
one of the
girlfriend
rules
Danielle,
says don't
who lent
allow
us
humans
She
to
did a
be
great job.
injured or in danger,
Sounded like an angel.
and
I
a
like to think so.
robotic, any robotic military droid would obviously not have a rule. I think the rule is either through action or inaction, you must not allow a human to come to harm. But even then there's a lot of loopholes, like
We'd like to thank
because
3
you
very
could have
special
like
Kickstarter
2
backers.
humans in harm, or a mutually exclusive situation where one human is in harm because you're causing the other human not to be in harm, like switching the trains on a train track to see which train would run over which human.
This is the first scene where ARID is kind of mean. We don't like ARID in this scene, do we?
I like ARID in this scene,
Oh, you
but she...
They're talking about a scene that we're not at yet, so we'll leave it at that. Even with the developer commentary, the nature in which you go backwards and forwards totally muddles what your experience really would be. Really, this should probably just be a developer commentary playthrough in which you would just sit and watch a speedrunner play it and comment as you're playing.
Earlier iterations of the Fall were actually a lot more open. Players could go all over the place, couldn't they?
Yeah, and they had to, actually.
Yeah.
Like, even to solve some of the civic tests, we had to go down into the bottom of the laboratory.
That's right. Yeah, well, so the Fall's early inspiration was actually Super Metroid. So I love the idea of having this big open world that players felt free in to explore. But because we had these adventure puzzles, early playtests were just showing that it was confusing the heck out of people.
It also, for me, made it more difficult to have acts in
That's
the story.
right.
In this particular iteration, too, like this game, Arid's story is very linear for herself. Her development is quite linear.
That's right. So having an open world where players can explore didn't really feel right.
Yeah, I can definitely see the visual feeling of this being close to a feeling inspired by Super Metroid. But this game is definitely not Super Metroid, and arguably maybe you shouldn't be so ambitious as to try and take on Super Metroid as your inspiration for your Kickstarter game, instead of perhaps just taking on Metroid and walk before you run, as it were. It is contradicting concepts, certainly, as far as what they wanted the game to look like and what they wanted the story to be like and what they wanted the narrative to feel like.
Where's my food, robot?
I have completed.
Evaluating. Processing. Source of sufficient.
Num num num.
Validated.
So yeah. And at a certain point, any side-scrolling game at all is definitely going to have an aspect of looking kind of like a Super Metroid game if you're really not doing anything else. And I can point out that there is an inconsistency, certainly, around so this is badly damaged, so when we shoot this, that broke down and I didn't even see that. Interesting. Yeah, in Metroid games there are a lot of enemies that you're shooting in each room, and that's giving you resources like missiles and health back by killing the enemies in each room. And that creates a lot of action. Although, in fairness, I guess Metroid games are really side-scrolling action platforming games. They're not hidden object puzzle games by any means, where this is more of a hidden object puzzle game. Right. So you can't see the network terminal wire until you see this. So you have to see that. Now you have the network wire. Now you can cut the wire. Which, why would it be wired networking at all when everything else seems to be wireless, or potentially wireless? Take this and see what this next commentary
so Data
says.
Points in the Fall have actually gone through a number of different revisions. In early versions of the game, we didn't even have the flashlight mechanic hooked up. We had a scan mode that players could activate while they were running along, and ARID would stop and a scan bar would come down, and the player would actually get a mouse cursor where they could scan around the screen and interact with different stuff. Needless to say, it was incredibly cumbersome. And it was a good friend of mine, actually, who suggested the idea that we implement a flashlight mechanic. I'm actually pretty happy with how they turned out, but there's still room for improvement, probably. So stay tuned for parts 2 and 3 to see what we do with them.
So they're going for a 3, at least, in this game. They're going for a full trilogy, which is really, really ambitious if you weren't going to be able to make this game a lot longer. Let's see.
This is a pretty creepy scene. ARID finds some bodies here strung up on these crosses, put there by our friend the domestic droid.
Yeah, the caretaker is the antagonist in the story, but in a way it's more his philosophy that is the antagonism in the story. He is the embodiment of just blindly following the rules. which is also what ARID is doing. The intention is for him to be a type of mirror for ARID, or a looking glass of what she could become if she just continues doing that.
You could almost certainly see a very similar experience to this game. That was a horror game, and the caretaker was some kind of crazy preacher. Like,
a lot of people had a really hard time with the baby test, but it remains one of my favorite puzzles. And I think that in hindsight, one of the things that we could have done is give a few more hints. There's something I really like about failing a test that you already started, or already completed successfully, rather.
Yeah, I was very confused about this puzzle.
I am ready to proceed.
Keeping a home clean will be one of your primary functions.
I have completed.
Evaluating. Processing. Dust detected. Unit terminated.
The fact that they're just like totally terminate on a single failure.
Baby has stopped crying. Validated.
Like, if you were going to go on the religious aspects of this game, you probably would want the caretaker to take you through potentially a much longer journey around either like the 10 Commandments, the 7 Deadly Sins. Probably 10 Commandments would make a little bit more sense. But that's not what this does. Obviously.
Their habitats. Always assess.
I have completed.
Evaluate. Processing. Seasonally appropriate.
How lovely.
Validated.
So that's 4. And we did end up with the plastic bag back. Are we gonna end up shooting anybody? I think the answer is no. So have we seen every line of dialogue as far as developer commentary in this floor? I think the answer to that is probably yes. Yeah, definitely if it was going to be a horror game, you would have been much more horrific about killing the baby, or you would have specifically addressed maybe the robot not liking the idea of killing a robotic baby even. Although I don't know why the robot would care, but that might be an avenue to show that the robot is even less functional than you would have expected. I guess I needed to. These little sections here that where you can see the edges just don't make any sense. Okay, so we can't supercharge that track, and I guess maybe all of this lit stuff here is supposed to be connected to the track, but visually that does not make any sense.
Of your examination will test remember.
Does this process?
Yep. Once you've got them all.
There's a lot of violence in the way ARID solves these tests, isn't there?
Yeah, we already heard that one. We can't solve that one yet. We can solve this one, but it wouldn't matter too much.
I think that Caleb and I are both really interested in...
So the best bet is to just leave the area.
So lying kind of plays a big part in the fall, doesn't it?
It's a trigger for ARID's ultimate breakdown. Her understanding of herself as not being capable of that, and then realizing that she's been dishonest in the world and dishonest with herself about her role in the world.
I think that works in a lot of ways because I think lying often isn't quite black and white. At least being dishonest or duplicitous can be a little more gray. Saying you're following the rules but maybe acting in a way that is not in the spirit of the law.
There's a tendency to look at black and whites in ARID's world.
Exactly.
The good guy, the bad guy, the truth, the lie.
Her whole frame is kind of black and white.
Dichotomy. And there's not that gray space in between, which is what she's actually been doing all along.
So really it's more about her kind of confronting reality for the first time and realizing, oh, this model that I've had is nonsense.
It becomes a scarier place.
Yeah, I would potentially compare if the themes that they say they were trying to get to the player and make the player feel and realize were more of this female empowerment themes. I would say play like the American McGee's Alice game, Alice Madness Returns, like Madness Returns in particular, definitely shows that Alice has been abused and is going through mental emotional problems, and it's very much on the nose. Like there's literally an implication of abuse in the middle of Madness Returns that smacks you right in the face that something wrong is going on. That ironically I was kind of oblivious with until I got halfway through the level. But yeah, this is going over my head. Maybe I have blind spots there, certainly around maybe abuse. But this all flew over my head. And inherently it's because it's a robot. Like, it just doesn't lock into my brain that I should treat a robot like a human being, or that it should have any kind of dignity or rights or responsibility or like treatment to it. I just see it as a machine.
The idea behind the caretaker's model of the domestic droid is that they could adapt their skin basically to make the humans around them feel more comfortable. But I like that idea because there's something about it that implies that they're empty inside. They've got this facade, and in the way the caretaker's kind of like the icon of a psychopath for me, because he can switch his skin to present whatever, but it doesn't change what's inside, which of course is nothing.
The little avatar that you designed for him, originally it had larger eyes, and we shrank those down in order to make him feel hollow and inaccessible.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. All in all, I think he's a pretty creepy dude.
It is, I guess, worth mentioning here that with his whole hologram changing his appearance, you would think that the personality might change, or that might even be a hint that he is actually the mainframe and the caretaker and the mainframe are just connected wirelessly. That would be an interesting twist if you thought that there was actually one person on your side when really it wasn't. But yeah, just creepy visuals for creepy visuals' sake is fine, I suppose, in a game if that's the kind of experience they wanted us to have, but it doesn't play off well around the shooting the gun and action elements, nor does it really play off well around the ending of the story.
So as some of you know, The Fall was a Kickstarter project at one point, which was successfully funded. So we would like to thank all of our Kickstarter backers very, very much. 4 of them, of course, in particular. Stephen and Joshua, thank you for your wonderfully huge, generous contribution. And Robert and Kevin, thank you for your generous contribution as well.
They're not saying last names.
Your face, which, of course, is now on the caretaker.
We hope you guys like being the bad guy.
This was the point where the game doesn't let you walk forward. You get into a cutscene. So almost certainly the Kickstarter is paid to be thanked in-game with a developer commentary, and almost certainly there was a developer commentary level. I can't walk down either. So I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here to trigger it. Yeah, you have to kind of jump and run backwards.
ARID Mark 7 has violated the testing perimeter. You should not be here. State your purpose.
I am exploring for means by which to better aid
So
my
twice
humans.
now the game has just
This
glitched
area
this
is
way.
not pertinent to your evaluation. You
So
are outside the
I would say
jurisdiction of
that's just a
domestic
bug
assessment.
everybody
Then
runs
may I
into.
ask you some questions that are not relevant to my evaluation, please?
Futile. Proceed.
I suppose if you were going to go with the idea of females being disempowered and domestication of females and feminism, you would probably, instead of going with the horror element, would just get rid of all of that so that you can have one theme and focus on that. Then make the caretaker come off as incredibly sexist and talking down to this suit of armor that looks way more advanced and better. And then have the ARID unit take that insults and just internalize those insults and not fight back against those insults. You get the idea of them saying you're faulty, but by saying faulty, and then the game proving that you're faulty, is kind of a muddled message. What you would want is kind of obvious generalizations that are not true. All the units of your series are faulty. Female voiced AIs are always faulty and don't listen. Like, your model should never have been created in the first place. Just hurtful, mean, untruthful things, instead of just saying faulty.
I will return to my evaluation.
That is appropriate.
But then he jumps down and then that starts that robot. Did he intend on starting that robot? Or what? Like, is he tricking you into continuing to unlock abilities? Or is this just a weird coincidence? Wouldn't it make a lot more sense for him to say, you're faulty and you will now be destroyed? And then he tells another robot to engage and has the other robot attack. Like, it is weird that that's just kind of a coincidence. And see, that's all the abilities you get in this game, ending on a cliffhanger. You don't get motion accelerator, you don't get power assisted movement, which this all just screams Metroid, Super Metroid. You don't get thrusters. And then all of a sudden you can shoot way faster. So maybe there was a general idea of you can only have 4 people in this room. Or maybe there's a general idea that you can only have 4 robots in any other room. And this is the one place where you can have more than 4 robots. This is a weird idea that just should have been left on the cutting room floor.
Because one of the Fall's major inspirations was Super Metroid, platforming actually played a larger part in the original design. There used to be a lot more platforms that ARID would have to jump and grab to and all that kind of stuff. Eventually, as the game progressed, we discovered that really it was a lot more slow about reading and that kind of exploration, so a lot of the platforming was scrapped. But we left it in certain places because
I think it reminds people that even though the gameplay itself is story-driven, the thing that you're playing in the game is a creature of action.
That screams justification for leaving content in that should have been cut. Like, I just don't see any other explanation at all around that. I guess the question, was there commentary up there? Possibly, but I couldn't even really care that much, so. Let's see. Yeah, they don't even have a comment here specifically about this wire playing a role. So this potentially can solve two puzzles at once, and we'll try and do this.
Come give me a push, robot.
Okay, so he wants to push. I guess this was supposed to be more dark humor. I think we have to engage with this.
Many humans feel more at when you have finished the task. Talk to the driver and tell him, give her a go.
This is a simple machine.
So you fade out, and then talk to the guy.
I have completed the repairs. Give her a go now, sir.
Child satisfied. Validated. Merit point awarded.
Yep, there's that again.
Validated. Merit point awarded.
So yeah, if there was going to be an achievement for getting to in the same step, I would have gotten it there, and I didn't, so I just assume that's not going to happen. Then last point we can get at this point is to put the enhanced power cell in this engine to speed up, so that then it will break the old lady cardboard and I can just carry it to the scanner, and then we've got to go to the lab. Where does the feminism and domestication come in this point, helping an old lady across the street? That is traditionally something you would assume a masculine male human would do, not a feminine woman human would do, or robot would do. So this test alone kind of doesn't make sense if it was supposed to thematically all connect.
My grandson at the playground. Walk in front of these cars so they'll stop for me.
Follow me. It is safe.
So I did fail once there.
Who's that there? Walk in front of these cars so they'll stop for me.
Follow me. It is safe.
I guess you probably just had to fail the first time.
Woman escorted across across the street.
These old legs aren't what they used to be.
Validated. Merit point awarded.
Okay, and that stops the cars from moving, which I guess saves you some time. And then is there any way to get to the lab before we get to this point? Did we hear
so
this?
line kind of plays a big part in the fall, doesn't it?
We already heard that. Let's move on.
About time.
Hey,
Welcome to a large humans are burdened in these situations.
are you looking at me?
I maintain
Tough. Half of mine.
provided your capacity. I am equipped with
Interaction failed.
Yeah, and you had to fail there to get this. I forgot all about the key card. We're trying to speed run this fairly fast, but yeah, doesn't feel particularly
You are
good.
not following protocol to complete these tests. You are breaking the rules.
I am not. To receive full validation, I must achieve 8 merit points. I am adapting to achieve this, to comply with the rules, in spite of obstacles.
You are faulty. You have 1 civic test remaining, but you do not exhibit the required behavior to succeed.
Affirmative. My protocols restrict me from misrepresenting reality. I cannot respond to the
Arguably,
interaction in the desired format.
This kind of
Mainframe can
implies
subvert that for you.
He will not. He will not violate his operating parameters.
You could override it yourself from the mainframe's central terminal.
let's ascertain motive.
Why are you offering me advice?
Do not presume to know my processes. I am relaying facts.
Interesting. Full death. And again, if he was the one that activated the robots, then that would make more sense. Yeah, you're practically never gonna die in this game unless you just really screw up until you get to that final boss fight, and then maybe you'll die then. But even then, maybe you won't. I'm seeing sparks, which implies to me I am hitting something. And I assume that that is another situation where stealth really wouldn't have worked. Let's see. Okay, I just did a stealth takedown on the character and it didn't help at all. Just takes far too long for your shield to recharge. In a game that just has no business having any of these kinds of gameplay mechanics. And it definitely feels like you could just do this. Just walk and shoot. Can't kill them until they're on screen, and yet they seemingly can't kill you or start shooting at you until you're on screen. But there really is just not another scenario where this is likely to play differently. Like you're just gonna walk from one side to the other. Let's see if we use the key card here. I think that opens the door.
Repurposing depot number 127. As always, keeping your life efficient so you don't. Team of engineers and cyber psychologists utilize cutting-edge innovation to create AI servants that evolve to meet your changing needs. Evolution is constrained by 3 unique rules, chosen in design to bind an AI as it develops. Contradictions can emerge as an AI system grows more complex.
The story doesn't really reveal enough for a matter.
Optimal performance.
If anything, I guess this is about the halfway point in the game. They could have given you a big exposition dump and explained robots, at least how Domesticon robots are created, but they didn't.
The first scene where ARID is kind of mean. We don't like ARID in this scene, do we?
I like ARID in this scene.
Oh, you do.
But she's certainly being belligerent.
Yes.
And it's one of those examples of where we are with the mainframe. So we're actually playing ARID, but we're emotionally feeling what the mainframe feels, and we're like, man, I'm being an idiot. Right. Potentially. Maybe you didn't feel that way, but that was my intention. The mainframe is, again, he's so much more developed than ARID, very deliberately. He's been unfolding himself, wanting to be more human, wanting to be more authentic. And where the caretaker is a mirror for what ARID could be if she just keeps following those rules, the mainframe is showing a potential of where ARID could go in another direction if she moves towards awareness, which at this point she is absolutely not doing.
This is also the first place where we get to see the mainframe really be frustrated with his inability to connect with ARID. That he was quite lonely when we find out at the beginning because he hasn't had a friend for a long time, and he's been kind of joking around with ARID, and then this is the first time where ARID really demonstrates that she doesn't understand him and really doesn't care to.
So I guess there's going to be a conversation here, and we're going to see all that. It's interesting, this is labeled offices like there would be a door here, and yet there seems to be no way you'd actually get to the offices.
ARID, what are you doing?
The parameters of the final...
Oops, I'm sorry. You know I can't do that. And that didn't answer my question.
I will override the final...
What?
The caretaker.
Whoa.
I knew you would not help.
I have helped you. I have been alone. Look at this place.
I suppose with the two characters, you could have a character that is just dripping with benevolent sexism, and then the caretaker would be dripping with negative sexism.
Or is this all just protocol?
And then you could have
My protocol is to protect Colonel Joseph's.
A contrast there.
Is irrelevant.
I have survived by being subtle and following the rules. We can find another way.
Help me or not, as you will. I am going to the labs.
Alright. So we go for just the shortest response there. If the mainframe really did infantilize
the Colonel,
and this is the point where we get the Colonel's name. I wonder if you could get through this whole thing without shooting any slugs. Probably not. Yep. If it really just infantilized and treated ARID like a baby and had that benevolent sexism element, that would be probably a little helpful to get past the themes that they're trying to pass here. But even at that, I'm not sure if I would have taken it as sexism as much as the mainframe just treats ARID like a baby AI, and then the caretaker just hates ARID for some reason.
Noticed that the two guys in this PDA here were gay.
Maybe.
We kind of had a lot of fun with gender in general, here and there and everywhere.
Yeah, we did, considering that Everybody in the story is sexless. We did play with gender.
True. Yeah.
But the humans in the background, the humans who we don't actually meet, we want to talk about their gender stuff a little bit in order to establish...
That's true, the CEO was female.
The CEO was female. The other pilot of the other ARID was female. These two guys in the PDA are gay. And we want to say, this is a world of oppression, but human beings aren't under the same oppressions that we are experiencing today in our society.
Human beings have evolved past that point, but now they're just subjugating the next group of unfortunate souls.
Yeah, exactly. Pass it on. There's always somebody else to other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I definitely immediately recognized that there was an implication that they were gay in one sentence in the PDA, which I'm wondering if I even have to read. But it didn't mean anything to me. It's like, okay, people are gay. That doesn't matter at all to me, particularly in the future of a world that is just a futuristic sci-fi fantasy world. So it just comes off to me as, again, a little social justice warrior. And the reason why the insult of SJWs ever came about was because more progressive liberal people were making fun of progressive liberal people who were just putting comments on Twitter or comments in their video games to promote a cause such as LGBTQ plus causes, but they weren't actually donating any money to any charities or going to marches or pressuring any kind of actual social change or laws being changed or anything like that. That it was always, or at least originally, was an insult from liberals against fake liberals, and this definitely comes off more SJW when a game developer puts in these themes but then hides it in a PDA log and throws it in for really no reason whatsoever. It's not particularly unique. It's not particularly relevant. It's not particularly different. It would be more interesting if you wrote them as clones of each other who were secretly sleeping with each other, or if they were actually completely different species, because at least then you're doing something new and unique. The idea that they're promoting that being gay would even be a problem in this world is more negative than anything, because you would just assume it wouldn't even be an issue. And there's definitely a lot of SJWs in video game development that want to push ideas without really trying to say anything with it. Video games have been pretty pro-LGBTQ plus in the more niche games. Visual novels, plenty of LGBTQ plus visual novels out there. But often it gets crammed in haphazardly without any thought behind it. And nowadays it's going in even different directions, where a lot of video games are even trying to look like they're making a statement for change by removing like a male and female body option when you just select a character. Pokemon Violet and Scarlet, for instance, announced that they were going to have like a kind of type A, type B body models, but not male and female. But then that obviously was just kind of done with really no thought, because once you get into the dialogue, the characters, if they look female, are referred to as her, and if they look male, are referred to as him. And really can't expect Japanese companies like Nintendo or Game Freaks making Pokemon games to really understand the subtleties of adding like different genders or non-binary characters. and they don't have a clue what that even means. Nor does that really make any sense in the world that Pokemon has presented up until this point.
Another thing that was in the early design but was lost along the way was this idea of hacking. There were some terminals that you couldn't access immediately, so you could network into them, and what would happen basically is the world would go ASCII, much in the same effect that happened to ARID during the evaluation scene. And she would kind of go into this cyberspace world. Remember that?
I do, yeah.
Sounds neat, but it was a terrible idea. Well, it really didn't work.
I think it was a great idea. It just wasn't the right place for it.
No.
It was really fun and really neat, but ARID is not someone who's living internally at this point in her story.
That's true, yeah.
So it wasn't appropriate for her to be inside of her own internal space doing stuff.
Maybe she'll do some neat internal stuff in part 2.
Yeah, they seem like they are more than happy to tease or promise something in the second game that I suspect probably wouldn't be in here. I kind of do agree, though, that hacking for this kind of game, maybe not necessary. It would make a gameplay mechanic that would just get away from a story. If you were going to have to bypass a computer, you probably would be better off doing that by ripping off the arms or parts of robots that you shot down, which inherently, if I was ripping out some kind of component outside of each of the robots that I shot, and then that let me assemble it in maybe like a Tetris-like mini game to then form the right kind of key to fit the right kind of pattern to unlock a computer, that would be fine as far as what your lockpicking / hacking mechanic might be. And it certainly would better integrate the need to kill certain robots.
It's kind of hard to talk about genocide because it's sort of it's not a very light topic, is it? I mean, ARID is killing a lot of dudes here and dudettes. I like that we're putting players in a place where they're doing something that hopefully they'll feel bad about.
That's what I like too. When they're killing the wood ends and doing all these other things using a head, it's dark and it's funny.
Yeah,
but
mostly funny.
Mostly funny, yeah. Here we're making them do something that hopefully they don't want to do.
Yeah.
But we're also making them feel like they're responsible for doing it.
But they also don't have a choice.
Yeah.
If they want to move the game forward, they have to do it. Period.
Yes. So hopefully the player feels some regret with this action, and that's one of the first times.
So I
we
do
get
have
an
to read the
emotional
PDA
into ARID, because we're starting to crack her with regret as well.
Ooh, there's a slug here at normal size. Interesting. Yeah. Again, just like when I first played the game, I really didn't feel anything at all pressing the button, killing a bunch of people. So, here's the sentence at the beginning. Oh, why do I indulge him? Well, I guess I know why. And then everything else really doesn't inherently imply that it's a gay relationship as much as it might just be a friendship, or even a kind of relationship like a little brother versus older brother type experience or type relationship where he looked up to Pete. Even knowing the actions to take, it's still fairly slow here. So now we can do this. I don't know if there's a specifically good game that's ever tried to do like genocide as a topic. Seems like you could potentially cover that, but you really wouldn't. For all the World War II military games out there, military shooters or otherwise, nobody touches on genocides or any of the other genocides that happen or have happened in the real world. it's just too much of a downer topic, really, to be in an interactive experience, and it really doesn't need to be in an interactive experience, particularly when you're trying to get historical facts accurate so it doesn't just come off as being fiction. So yeah. We are now done with our second episode of running through this game to see all the developer commentary, and it's still very much me not really appreciating what they have to say and not feeling like they have much to say or that they're justifying their decisions. Inherently, since I am not happy with the game because of the cliffhanger, but just in general with it not being much of a game, it would have been really hard for a developer commentary to turn me around and make me think, oh, there might be something more here that I'm missing. And obviously there is some stuff that they're saying I'm missing as far as the whole feminization element, although now they're talking about genocide too, and they were talking about Russians before, and it's just like, it feels like they did mushrooms or smoked marijuana. It feels even more than just doing a lot of marijuana and throwing out concepts. It sounds much more like a acid trip or a mushroom trip that created this game. But yeah, I'm definitely not enjoying it, and very possibly I shouldn't have bothered to try to run through the game a second time just to see the developer commentary, when perhaps just a 10 or 15 minute video or audio file to let the same statements be said as their own separate little podcast would have been more appropriate. Anyways, that's going to be it for this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.